In a journal titled Pluralistic Ignorance Among Student Athlete Population, Stephen Klein was a football player at Kansas State University who entered college wanting to become a veterinarian and ended up graduating with a degree in social sciences instead, and working at a construction site in order to save up enough money to go back to school to become a veterinarian. In order to stay eligible and focus on football, Klein was advised to switch to an easier major, one which drew 34% of football teams juniors and seniors, compared to the 4% overall of the school's juniors and seniors. And this story is a harsh reality of what is happening with college athletes in America and expressing the lack of care for athletes' future education. I would like to support the student athlete and find a solution, unlike the New York Times article, Fraud of the Student Athlete Claim, where the editorial board suggests this is wrong but does not seem to have a call to action of resolving this issue. I plan on previewing why the New York Times should have approached this serious issue on the education system of the student athlete as a policy instead of simple opinion. I will further explain certain policies and why these policies can help student athletes, unlike the New York Times was able to do. The first problem we look into is why this article appears to be lost without a policy. What happened at North Carolina is shameful but not surprising. Until the NCAA recognizes that some players are essentially professionals, universities will continue to treat their education like the fig leaf it is. Young people enticed by the fantasy that they can play and learn at a high level continue to suffer the consequences. This is the New York Times' main claim. Nothing wrong with the stance this article took, except having trouble issuing such needs as a strong policy instead of voicing just a weak opinion. And the New York Times should have done what the New York Times should have done was display a strong policy to present an idea for mistreating student athletes' education. The NCAA and universities should have athletic academic counselors, reduce practices, and rid of the 40-60-80 plan to ensure better opportunity for better education to the student athletes. The New York Times needed it to add solutions to the problem addressed with the student athlete education instead of expressing a hot take on the issue. In the policy section for the student athletes remaining eligible academics, the NCAA highlights that you must earn 6 credit hours a semester, have a 2.0 GPA, and take at least 12 credit hours. What is lost by not including a policy in the New York Times is the action to stand up for athletes who struggle with wanting a valuable education. And the New York Times writes this just as another news story, but should be advocating and fighting for those student athletes. Now I will move into the first area of the policy, and having athletic academic counselors for student athletes can help fix the neglect student athletes receive. Giving athletes academic counselors can create a system where student athletes can go through a series of processes to determine the type of majors and classes that should be taken for them. This is a policy that has a chance for athletic goals and academic goals to coexist, and if the two of these groups can work together on shortening the practices to create more time for study, this can help student athletes a ton. The New York Times needed to go deeper into the struggle for the class selection and practice time to understand the full magnitude of the problem. A proposal for the necessary tension in higher education states, all academic advisors and counseling staffs who work with student athletes should be informed about the educational needs of student athletes and should conduct regular meetings to create a comprehensive, supportive environment. This can help student athletes who find who they are and what they want to do in the potential future after athletics. Practice hours for student athletes can be stressful by itself, and you add the daunting task of everyday college schoolwork, we find athletes can be overwhelmed. In an article called Student Athlete Mental Health Issues, athletics that experience large amounts of physical activity for such issues in depression, sleep problems, fatigue, social performance anxiety. When students have to deal with such problems, it is highly doubtful that athletes can perform in class and their overall education. The New York Times noticed this but did not seem to do much research into why this is such a problem. For my final policy that the New York Times needed to make a firm stand on but didn't is the 40-60-80 rule and how this is hurting student athletes' educational dreams. A report called Academic Clustering in Intercollegiate Athletes said the 40-60-80 rule is focused on finishing certain percentages of coursework by a particular time and completing a specific amount to stay on pace for graduation. Athletes must complete 40% of work by the third year, 60% by the fourth, and 80% by the fifth year. This rule seems to have a reasonable system, but this system is the exact reason college athletes are suing for not receiving a proper education. In a journal titled Maintaining a Balance Against Academics and Athletics, describes this rule as problematic because the student athletes are enrolled into easy majors and have no real choice in exploring the experiences of finding oneself to figure out what these student athletes desire to major in. The New York Times wrote this article. There was valuable information left out on student athletes' enrollments into classes. The neglect on the 40-60-80 rule in this article showed a lack of support to realize this rule is the problem and neglecting an opportunity to propose a policy and fixing these issues by the NCAA and universities everywhere. In conclusion, looking at the New York Times article, seeing their hearts were in the right place, there is still no excuse for sitting by just voicing an opinion on an issue without giving a firm call to action. I went over why the New York Times should have had a policy in place and why the policy should have required getting rid of the 40-60-80 rule, giving athletes less time practice-wise, and providing academic athletic counselors that are scheduled to student athletes only. I will leave you with this. Should we turn our backs on student athletes that are being deprived of real education, or instead look a little deeper into the information to find out the NCAA is cheating our student athletes and killing the American dream for them as well? The time for action is now, and to help improve student athletes' education everywhere.